Today we wanted to talk about something other than a technique. It's an overriding principle to different training methodologies and modalities. And in my time kind of looking at the different ways that people train and in my experience, I find that there's three major ways that people train. One, and usually it would be like the school or the instructor or the professor himself will create an environment where one of these is more strongly emphasized. So the three that I have come up with is one is drill to win, two is osmosis, and three is details, details, details. And the drill to win mindset or methodology is very physical, and it has people drilling a lot of big macro movements. So they will repetitively drill a guard pass, they will repetitively drill a side mount escape to turtle out, to putting their partner on their back, and their partner will do the same drill, and there will be a lot of movement, and it's very highly physical and it's highly active. It's very good because what it does is it drills into your mind, into your body, and every cell in your body is so used to repeating those motions that basically it becomes like automatic. But along with benefits, there also comes slight disadvantages to each different version. So I think on the drill to win mindset, it's really good because like I said, it works its way into you. The downside is, though, if there are missing details. So if you drill a macro movement over and over and over again, you can become very good at that movement. But if you do something wrong in that macro movement, so you're drilling and you're accommodating each other while you drill.
You built the wrong habit.
Yeah, so you may have built a habit that later you end up needing to recover from. And that can also be very minor. It can be like, oh, every time I do that, I grab the wrong way, and it can be because we drilled it that way. And I also find that it's quite physically taxing. So it makes jiu-jitsu into like a very almost like a CrossFit, all that repetition, all that physicality. But it can have its definite benefits. And I think out of these three, they will all have their place in our training. So that being said, benefits, lots of movement, lots of macro, lots of drilling it into us. Downside, there will be some missing details. And then there's the osmosis way of training. Osmosis training is you come in, you drill a technique or two. So you might learn a technique or two, drill it for a few minutes, and then sparring. And so why I call it osmosis is because osmosis is that effect of like when something sits on top of another thing over time, it will absorb it. And so we get crushed, and so getting crushed is kind of like osmosis too. And I find that the osmosis way of training is come in, learn a few techniques, and there's a lot of sparring. And sparring is so great, and sparring is an absolutely essential part of our learning process. And I think the upside of it is that people will learn and they'll have a lot of fun, and they're going to get the best workout ever, and they're going to pick up so many things about jiu-jitsu. They're even going to create their own jiu-jitsu. I find that the downside of it is the same as the up. Creating your own jiu-jitsu might mean that my techniques work on my training partners. And let's say my training partners, they're all quite good. But at some point or another, there's a certain deficiency in my skill, and one of the people says, but when you do that every single time, I can choke you. And you say, so by osmosis, I picked up an answer that was my own jiu-jitsu. So I use my own flexibility, I use my own strength, I use my own awareness and my own ability to adapt, but at the same time, because it's my own, it might not have considered all possibilities. And I think the only way that we can consider all possibilities is with starting with structure. And so osmosis is great because you do learn, but sometimes what you might be learning might be not the final answer. So I always consider like osmosis like this. If you were to send like a You know, if you were an aspiring artist and you wanted to paint, and I just said, hey, here's like some brushes and here's some paint, lots of colors, here's like some wood and some paper, and just make whatever art you want, like go for it. And you could probably get to be quite good. What's the downside? How long is it going to take you to get good?
A lot longer.
Oh, a lot longer. And are you going to definitely become a good artist?
Not necessarily.
You could be horrible.
Yeah.
But I'm not saying that a jiu-jitsu practitioner will become horrible, but could you get discouraged?
Yes.
So I think that there is a certain amount of discouragement that comes with osmosis and so much trial and error. It's like trying to reinvent the art on your own. And so I find that, like, I always refer to, I believe it's Leonardo da Vinci, one of the greatest artists of all time. I believe that he is technically trained in a school. So he learned to be an artist before he became the greatest artist of all time. So I believe with great guidance and with structure, if somebody was to teach us first, and then we were to start to move, so you start almost off like a science, and then you move into the art of it. So osmosis is great. It just comes with its downsides, which is, again, discouragement, trying to figure things out on our own sometimes doesn't come up with the best answer. And then I think the final thing is, because osmosis includes so much physicality and so much trial and error, that tons of sparring and tons of just freestyling it, there's more possibility for injury, of course, just by being able to move randomly at all times. So I think there is some benefit for sure, and it should be a part of anyone's training, but the downside would be those few things. And then the other one, the third one, I believe, is learning by details. And learning by details is pretty cool, right? If you have a master who says, do this, this, and this, and you will get this result. And so I like that because there's a lot of finality and direction in what you're learning, and it's like every little leverage point and every hook, every connection is very technical. What's the downside of it though? The downside of it could be
you're not actually trying to use it in a live sparring.
I guess, yeah. I think if there was less sparring, that would be a possibility. I think if you include sparring, then learning details has its upsides for sure, because when you spar, then you can see if your technique works. From what I've seen is that being too detail oriented makes it so that, number one, you don't allow yourself to move into the art of things. So you don't start off, I think the best way would be to start off as a technician and then to work your way into your art. And so if you start off as a technician and you're such in an environment of like, oh, don't do that, but you must do it this way, this is the only right way to do things, then you're not able to branch out and explore and to learn and to become, and even to refine it on your own, or even just have the freedom to kind of think freely. So I think if you're too detail oriented and too, I think you can be confined by that. And I think, I don't think that happens very often, but I think it could be one of the downfalls of being overly detail oriented. I think the other downside of being overly detail oriented is that when you're detail oriented, you do not include the fourth and hidden overriding training methodology. And it applies to all three that we've mentioned so far: the osmosis, the drill to win, and the detail oriented. Is you do not apply principles as often if you adhere to any one of these three modalities too directly. So if you're too detail oriented and somebody says, hey, here is the perfect side mount escape, and you say, well, what if they hold you really tightly and they do this and they stop you? Well, what's the principle? The principle is, I'm showing you the perfect escape, but the principle is you escape when the time is right. And so you must apply a principle to being detail oriented. And so there's principles everywhere: the principles of connection, the principles of being neutral, the principles of being safe, the principles of putting defense first. So principles must override any of the modalities. Same thing with osmosis. If you're to adhere to great principles while you're learning by sparring and playing, you're going to say, don't use too much strength. and learn to flow. Soften it up a little bit, and when you have to tap, you must tap. That's okay to acknowledge defeat. And when you're in a bad position, it's okay to be in the bad position and figure out the right time to escape. And if you're in a good position, you should focus on control. When your opportunity comes, your submission will come. There's many principles, and the same thing with drill to win. If you apply principles to that, you can, I think, amplify the value of any three of the training modalities. My personal belief is, out of the three basic applications of the ways to train, I love the detail oriented, because I believe that those that came before us is like standing on the shoulders of giants. I trust those that came before us. I trust all the masters that our lineage represents. So there's a lot of trust there, because I believe that the ones that taught us have given us great answers. But in that trust, I also want to apply the principle of continuing evolution, and I want to become my own artist. So I believe that just kind of that healthy overriding mindset. So yeah, that's our little talk.
I think what you just said is important, because you might need to adapt the technique for you, for your body type, or for your size. If you don't understand the principles, then it could be really difficult if you just want to stick to those details, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
So it's like, eventually we will discover our own jujitsu. And that's why none of the ways should be put down. But we must acknowledge the downside of overemphasizing any one way. And so if we were to pick and choose and kind of create our own like blend, I think that it will be clear. And I think, just even without giving any direction or any opinion, what do you think? What do you think works best for you? And
last thing to say, I think it's worth kind of assessing where you're at too, because you don't want to go down like develop these habits for like 5 years, say, and then have like, hey instructor, can you check this technique out that I'm doing? And then and then find out that maybe you could be doing it another way that might be better for you. And
so kind of know where you have been, and where you are, and where you want to go.
So so even just like filming your technique, and like for a test or for for your own purpose, to figure out where you're at, just to analyze.
Or ask your teacher or somebody at your school to analyze your role, or even your drilling. I love it. And to watch your technique. That's great. There's so many tools there. It almost sounds like another video. So thank you guys. Hope you love it. Thank you.